Good afternoon, everybody. The remainder of this afternoon's proceedings will be transmitted on the live link after a 15-minute delay. Those with mobile telephones may use them to report what they hear in the hearing room, but only after 15 minutes have elapsed since the event that they're reporting. They may not be used for photography or recording.
Mr. Pearce, before lunch, we very lightly touched on true spies, and I want to ask you about that broadcast. But in doing so, I wonder if you can just bring up Mr. Pearce's statement. I'd like to refer you to page 156, paragraph 192.2, please. So here you set out that I accepted the outcome of the meeting on the 15th of January 2001 involving the production team, the commissioner, AXO David Vaness, and Chris Webb, who was the head of Directorate of Public Affairs, regarding the programme The Secret State. So this later changed its name to True Spies, yes? It is obvious that there were considerations pointing in both directions as to whether cooperation with the production team was desirable. I was satisfied that the question of whether it was appropriate to cooperate with the production team had been considered at an appropriately senior level. I had no reason to question the decision that such cooperation was appropriate. So are you setting the record straight there, that in terms of the decision, this is not your decision to cooperate with the programme makers, but it was made at a more senior level than you, so the Commissioner, AXO, and the Directorate of Public Affairs. Is that the position?
I'm saying that, and I'm also implying that it would have been advisable, I think, to involve in a discussion about the publication of counter-subversion tactics by the Met and special branches throughout the country, to involve the head of a special branch in those discussions. So I'm saying really I should have been notified or invited to that preliminary meeting.
So perhaps I'm putting it crudely, but was it a done deal by the time it reached your desk or your attention?
It was a done deal, and the first I received was a telephone call from, I think, Peter Taylor.
Because we have seen it in due course, after the programme is shown, you are on the receiving end of a lot of former special branch officers,
yes,
seeming to hold you responsible for that decision.
Yes.
What was your reaction to, after the programme has aired, you're suddenly receiving letter after letter from special branch officers complaining to you? What was your reaction at the time then, given you've indicated here it wasn't your decision?
Yes, well, it was completely understandable, completely predictable, and I suppose my anger at what happened and the way that the STS was exposed matched theirs. What I hadn't disclosed to them before was the reasoning behind it, the factors which had led to our necessity of cooperating with the BBC on this programme.
Do you know why those former special branch officers held you responsible or wrote to you as opposed to David Vaness or the Commissioner? Why was that?
They were special branch officers. I was the head of special branch. They knew me as well. So I suppose I was the obvious first port of call to vent their anger about this.
I want to give you an opportunity to respond to what one of the UCOs has stated in their witness statement, but just to provide context or possible context, could we please bring up on screen MPS 0741736? So this is at your tab B142. Now, this is a letter to you, and we can see from the BBC. I wonder if we can look at the second page as well.
Yes.
All right. So this is, and we can see in the middle there, Peter Taylor at the end. He was the driving force behind this programme. Had previously been involved in serious broadcasting programmes.
Yes, that's right.
He's writing to you there. And the beginning of this letter, he says, "Thank you very much for hosting such an enjoyable and productive lunch on Friday. It's very good to meet you, Colin and Bob, and to be able to discuss our new project and your work so informally. We were greatly encouraged by your kind offer of help with our new series on the history of subversion and counter-subversion in this country since the war. At this point, we envisage excluding Irish terrorism, as we have just completed an exhaustive study of the Irish conflict with our recent trilogy, Provost, Loyalists and Brits." Now, in relation to that description of why are they writing, again, it's in terms of the same sort of question, why are they writing to you as opposed to, say, the Commissioner or AXO? Why are you the recipient of their correspondence?
Well, because it follows from the meeting on the 15th of February, just a few days before. Peter Taylor's been given my name by the Department of Public Affairs, I imagine, and my contact number, and he's contacted us very shortly after that. And my reaction to that is that this is a, as you say, a done deal. It's a programme about subversion and in measures to counteract it throughout the country. So we cooperate. That's the Met line. That's the, as it turned out, the line of ACPO-TAM, the Terrorism Allied Matters Committee, headed by Ben Gunn, whose secretary was David Vaness. So it's a done deal.
I wonder if we can take this document down. And I want to, as I said, give you an opportunity to respond to something that HN81 stated in his Hearn witness statement. So I wonder if you can bring up MPS 0721941. So this document is at your tab B249. So it's another Hearn statement, and you've already commented on Hearn statements, but I wonder if we could turn to page 10, please, because you can see it's the True Spies section at the bottom. So this is what HN81 stated in his Hearn statement. He said, "Colin Black presented me with a commendation certificate. I remember I wasn't particularly appreciative of the commendation in light of what had happened with Roger Pearce and True Spies." And this is what he says next. "My understanding is that Roger Pearce went out for a meal with some journalists who were going to run a programme on Special Branch. He ended up having too much to drink and revealing the existence of SDS to the journalists. Roger Pearce said to the journalists it was off the record, but the journalists said that it wasn't. They then wanted to run a programme on the SDS instead of their planned programme, and the MPS agreed to do so for damage limitation purposes. I felt completely exposed after it was aired, as it would have been obvious to my wearies that I'd been an undercover officer. My deployment had finished 1 year earlier, but the profile of an SDS officer was revealed just at the time that I was dealing with compromises at work as I tried to reassimilate. I'd previously had a lot of respect for Roger Pearce, but this made me feel completely betrayed by him, and something Met management several times, and she feels betrayed by them too." So I don't we have this statement, Hearn statement from HN81. Could you comment on the accuracy of what he has set out here, please?
No, it's all wrong, but understandable, because HN81 doesn't have the story about the background leading to the necessity to cooperate with the programme True Spies rather than the programme The Secret State.
A general point is concerning that, and again, one of the UCOs, in terms of, this is something he's put in a witness statement and signed. It's quite a serious allegation to make that essentially you got drunk, spoke to the journalists, and as a result of that, True Spies. It's a very serious allegation to make. And again, we have this former UCO, this is about a year after deployment, writing this. Is that reflective? Is that too general a point, reflective of the accuracy of a UCO such as HN81? He's willing to write this about you if what you say is true and this is incorrect. What's the reaction to reading that from a UCO?
No, it's just untrue. It's he's been wrongly informed. And this is perhaps an example of a false story building through accretions of allegations about bad behaviour, and none of it happened. It simply isn't the way in which the events unfolded.
One more document I want to ask you about, True Spies, and then we'll move on to Operation Muscat. Could we turn to MPS 00, and then it's 1 with 4 zeros after it? MPS 00 10000. So it's another SDS file note about True Spies. This is one of Michael Dell's file notes. And it records on Wednesday the 28th, this would have been of 28th of August 2002, yes. Roger Pearce, Eric Mack and I met Peter Taylor and the programme's producer Sam Collins. If we just go to the last paragraph, so it's they conveyed the impression of being deeply concerned that they might be putting our colleagues in danger and offered to consider their options at greater length and to return next week with a detailed breakdown of the programme content. I judged that pressing for a copy of the tape when it is finalised should be delayed. Would this be the wrong impression, that after this meeting, it's not you and your colleagues expressing concern, but it's the programme makers conveying their deep concern that they might be putting your colleagues in danger? And so is that right, that they did express concern to you?
Well, I don't recall. It's not quite clear, but I think, first of all, as a former UCO, I would have been the most exposed of all by this programme because my name was on the Met's public material. So no one was at greater risk than the person in my position. But equally importantly, I think Peter Taylor knew that, for example, and through his deep experience of dealing with secret sources, sensitive operations in Northern Ireland, his work with MI5, his work with Special Forces and RUC, made him acutely aware of the need for great caution about this kind of material. So I had great respect for him as I came to know him as he began to make the programme. As I mentioned before the break, he was awarded the CBE last year, I believe, for his contribution to responsible journalism of a very sensitive nature. So this was, I think, from his team, I think as a gratifying mark of his sense of responsibility to the work he was doing.
So in terms of Mr. Taylor, he was a person you believe you could trust, and that was borne out by all your dealings with him?
Yes, I felt if this programme was going to be made, and it clearly was, and it was a scoop, I'd rather have him responsible for it than almost any other journalist you could think of.
I apologise, I will refer to one more document in relation to True Spies. Could we please pull up on screen MPS 0741738, so at your tab B147. And I just want to ask about this document that we're going to bring up on screen. Again, in the context of part of the reasoning for not pursuing the other options against James Thompson, so pursuing the informal approach, because understand what the evidence that you've given in relation to True Spies, but if we look at this letter of the 30th of April 2001, this is a letter explaining the programme, but if we look at, and it's someone's marked it in pencil at the bottom, the penultimate paragraph.
Yes.
The purpose of this letter then is to invite you, on behalf of the BBC team, to contribute to this project in any way you think fit, If you do wish to participate, I should be happy to act as an intermediary to put you in touch with Peter Taylor. I suggest that you ring or write to me in the first instance. So again, what would you say to someone who took this view that the suggestion of not dealing more harshly or harshly at all with Mr. Thompson because of concern about publicity and knowledge about the STS reaching the public, and then at around about this time, you are writing a letter on behalf of the BBC inviting for contributions in relation to it. Could you see how someone might be concerned about the reasoning there?
Absolutely. And my answer would be that because of the meeting on the 15th of January, the programme's been approved at the highest level of the Met. It's been supported by the chairman of ACPO TAM, and we're under an obligation to cooperate. So for damage limitation and to get the best result possible, it was important in my view to try and retain as much control as possible through my office of those who were willing to contribute, which is why I wanted them to write to me in the first instance, respond to me, rather than respond directly to the BBC. And that was, I think, an approach welcomed by Peter Taylor, actually.
But in that previous file note where the programme makers are a bit worried about exposing your colleagues, so there we've got an expression of concern from them. And in terms of damage limitation, what would you say if someone said it's not really limiting the scope of the programme, it's expanding it out? If you're sending out essentially around robin, it's not trying to limit it as much as possible. There's no document where from you're exercising pressure in the sense of trying to stop the programme or anything like that. And is the answer to that the one that you've given previously, that it's a decision that was made at higher rank?
Well, I draw a distinction between this letter, which affects the programme to look at subversion in general, in special branches throughout the country, actually, which is a fairly legitimate and standard area of research for the BBC to be looking at, which has been approved by the Met at the highest level, with the secondary and later an alarming revelation that the BBC had discovered the existence of STS through a retired special branch officer. And this was their scoop. So at one fell swoop, the secret state becomes true spies, and that was the focus of their interest. So my answer would be for the first element, this letter here, I have very little alarm comparing that with the James Thompson scenario. For true spies, it's quite different because we're into crisis management here rather than exploiting an opportunity. And we're looking at the least bad option, which ultimately is to invite certain retired former STS UCOs to contribute to the programme, which meant that we could look at the history of STS and avoid talking about the current operations of the STS. So in terms of the James Thompson situation, I think this was our best and safest damage limitation option.
I want to move to Operation Muscat. I want to test with you the justification for that operation. Could we please have up on screen MPS 0035869, please? Now, this is a chronology. I believe that this was produced by HN53, and if we just stand back and look at the heading Operation Muscat chronology, we can see October 1987, and we didn't even turn to that page yet, but the last date is the 13th of July 2004. So a significant operation relating to Helen Steele trying to find John Dines, yes?
Yes.
And what I would like to do is to go through this and just to test with you whether this was a necessary and justified operation. Is it right that although you had certainly at the later stages oversight of this operation, for a large part of it, HN53 was working in relation to
That's
Operation
correct.
Muscat? And in terms of, we will go through this in some detail, but at this point, is your evidence that although time consuming, although it took, for example, HN53 away from his other work, despite the expense, that this was a justified operation? Is that your position, knowing everything that you know now?
It was justified and necessary, in my view.
All right. If we just go through, we can see October 1987, John Dines joins the SDS. He's targeted against animal activists. 31st of March 1990, he's arrested during poll tax riot, possession of offensive weapon. Charges are withdrawn. 1990, he is instructed not to make himself available as a witness in the McLibel litigation. Now, just pausing there, did the involvement of John Dines in the McLibel litigation, in the sense that he was responsible for drafting part of the leaflet, was the concern about him being potentially called as a witness if it was revealed that he'd been an undercover officer in the course of those proceedings, which, as we know, extended for many, many years? Was that part of the justification, the necessity, the danger that he might be involved, brought into those proceedings in some sort of way?
Yes, I'm so sorry that this is so long before I returned to
It
SDS.
is 1990, yes.
I just can't help with that
All right.
question, I'm afraid.
Let's continue with the chronology. So November 1991, Lucozade contamination, John Dines involved with 3 other activists. December 91, JD concludes SDS operation with notional move to South Africa and then New Zealand, okay? So that's the end of his undercover deployment. Then we have 92 to 3, Helen Steele makes frequent telephone inquiries of John Dines' mother-in-law in New Zealand. 1993, John Dines retires from the MPS on ill health grounds, back injury caused during SDS operations. We can see he becomes a solicitor, moves to New Zealand. And then this, 20th of September 95, Helen Steele and Norman Blair visit JD's parents in London looking for New Zealand John. They show a photo of JD and make it clear they know he is their son. And then we can see the reaction, September, October 95, protective measures put in place in the UK and liaison established with New Zealand police. So pausing there, we can see in 95, this has now become international. There's a liaison established with the New Zealand police. So it's quite a dramatic step to take, yes?
Yes.
All right. Intelligence indicates, this is October 95, that Steele had travelled to New Zealand. Inquiries failed to establish when, why, or if she made the visit. And we can see, meanwhile, Dines begins practice as a criminal defence barrister. 7th of January 1998, Steele visits Dorothy Wolstenholme and shows her the same photos as above, looking for John Barker and asking about his first wife, and then she leaves New Zealand. And then we can see there's the reference to True Spies that we've just heard about. We can see there's a remarriage of John Dines. Now, pausing there, you have recently been made aware of Helen Steele's evidence of the correspondence between John Dines and her following the end of his deployments. That's right, isn't it?
Yes.
And you have had an opportunity to look at the extensive Appendix 1 schedule to Helen Steele's, I think, third statement, in which she sets out in schedule form the letters, the correspondence from John Dines to her from the moment, or from the time that he ends his deployment, but for months after that.
Yes.
And a broad question on any reading of that, can you understand that it is completely understandable why anyone who had been in a close sexual romantic relationship, and that following that relationship one person leaves and they send that level of correspondence and the content, is it not the most basic human reaction to try and find the person?
Yes, of course.
Now, looking back on this chronology just that we've started with here, does that, if you had known then what you know now, is it really possible for you to say that this was necessary and justified?
I think so, because although my knowledge of John Dines' STS record, operational record, is sketchy, because I wasn't around at that time, I do know from anecdotal evidence that he was a very successful STS UCO who lived in very difficult, to start with, very difficult and squalid circumstances in squats and so on to establish cover, worked with huge diligence to set his operation on a good track to provide useful intelligence. So my assumption from that is that if you use his activities with Helen Steele as an activist, when she discovers that his identity is false, I said, I'm so sorry, I said John Black, it's John Barker. When she discovered that, in around 1994, I think, my reasonable assumption, I believe, is that her attempts to trace him are not through love, but through inquiry into his true nature. Is he a police officer?
Well, I understand there's a technical hitch, so we may need to pause. Thank you.
Working again now. Good.
Thank you.
Right, that's what I thought. Stops the knowledge. Yeah, so you're up to date. I'm sorry, sir, can you take 5 minutes?
Very well. I'm afraid these technical hitches occur almost invariably at the most inconvenient moment. Technical hitch resolved, I hope. Thank you. Yes.
Mr. Pearce, you said before the short break that you believed that Helen Steele's attempts to trace John Dines were not through love or any feelings towards him, but seeking to expose who he was.
Yes, and even if I've been wrong on that, I don't feel one could take the risk that it wasn't for some reason other than love to track him down.
What is your evidence as to when you found out that John Dines had had a sexual relationship with Helen Steele in his cover identity?
I can't recall when it was, but it would be some time after Muscat. I think it's at the time of the media revelations, actually.
One of the features of Muscat, isn't it, is the lengths that Helen Steele went to try to track down John Dines.
Yes.
Did it not occur to you that one of the reasons why a female actor
purpose of the order is to protect the legitimate privacy interests of a non-state corporation.
In terms of the actions of John Dines, would you agree that he was treated in the same way as other officers who had sexual relationships with those upon whom they spied, that no action is ever taken against them?
Yes.
And looking back on that now, does that not send a signal to those who act in that way that they can do so with impunity?
I don't think so, because several years had elapsed between the resignation of John Dines from the Met and his commencement of his new career. He's now a civilian, and it wouldn't have been appropriate to take, or possible, to take disciplinary action against him, I believe.
Given what you know now, that at its highest, Helen Steele confronted him, there was a camera there, confronted him.
Yes.
If you had known that that is all she was going to do, to confront him in the way that she did, would you agree that the entirety and the enormity of Operation Muscat was not, as you set out earlier, necessary? It wasn't necessary.
Well, if I hadn't known about their sexual relationship, and I was just considering the approach of Helen Steele determinedly to track John Dines down, if I'd known it was to be a simple confrontation and that would be the end of it, possibly we would have acted differently. But I couldn't possibly have known that at the time and had to act with caution in relation to the possible consequences for our STS officer.
May I ask that that document be taken down? I just want to move to a different topic.
Before we do that, it may be a convenient moment to ask
Yeah.
for your answer to the question that I asked
sir.
you at the end of the private session.
Yes.
Again, without disclosing what took place in the private session, are you able to answer my question?
Yes, and it's partly coloured by my sketchy knowledge of John Dines' early career as a UCO. But I believe it was a creditable one. It was a successful undercover deployment. And on that basis, I think I would have taken the same action, sir.
Thank you.
The topic I want to ask you about is this, that Peter Francis asserted that when it was announced that William Macpherson was to be the inquiry chair, the Lawrence inquiry, that up until that point he was concerned about any interaction with him. But when he found out that William Macpherson was to be the chair of the inquiry, he expressed the view that he, Macpherson, should be told about his role in gathering intelligence on those involved in campaigns seeking justice for Stephen Lawrence.
Yes.
And his evidence was that it was evident to him that you and Bob Lambert had discussed the issue, and he said that he sensed that you both were allied in trying to contain him. So he wants to tell William Macpherson about his role in gathering intelligence on those involved in campaigns seeking justice for Stephen Lawrence. And his impression was that you and Bob Lambert had discussed this between you and were trying to contain
Yes.
him. Could you help us with your recollection of that period and your recollection of interacting with Peter Francis, please?
There was none. His attitude towards Macpherson appears to have varied from fear of exposure to insistence on disclosure once he knew the name of the chairman and his record as an SAS warrior. His other concern was that his proposed redeployment was unsatisfactory and he wanted it changed. And on both of those, he claims to have either come to me, although I don't know how that would have happened, or that I've been sent out by somebody to see him, to threaten him and to warn him to back off. None of this happened.
I just want to put to you a document just in relation to what you've just said. Could we please bring up UCPI 37385? In relation to what you have just said, this is a Radio 5 interview on the 3rd of July 2013. I'm going to ask if we can just go straight to page 7 of this document. It's right at the bottom of the page, line 36. So the presenter asks you, but having said that you wouldn't have tolerated any kind of mention of a smear on your watch, but you know Peter Francis, is he a credible person? And your response here is absolutely. Peter is an effective, resourceful undercover officer, and I can't think where the word smears come from. I'm convinced it hasn't come from those who were tasking him, those who were managing him, and if it had been used, that person would not be any longer within special branch. And so in terms of your description a few moments ago about interaction with Peter Francis, would you agree that in fact here, more complimentary about his effectiveness and his credibility? Essentially, the question is he credible? That was the question. Is he a credible person? And your response there is absolutely.
Yes.
But your answers a few moments ago suggests that you would differ from that description of him that you gave during that interview.
Well, I think the first line of my reply is absolutely correct. An effective, resourceful undercover officer who actually underwent considerable hardship during his deployment in violent confrontations to which he was drawn. He was also known to be absolutely fastidious about his legend and his tradecraft. So he was a man with a high reputation. A good reputation within the STS team. So I'd have thought he was a credible person in that respect.
Can I return, we again, as a topic that we touched on briefly this morning, a topic of race. During your deployment as a UCO, were you deployed at the time of the Brixton riots, is that right?
Yes.
And so the issue of race, was that something that was very much in your mind as you occupy the position of Commander Ops and Commander Head of Special Branch? That background of yours, the Brixton riots, was that something that you were aware of, were conscious of, were sensitive to, race relations?
I suppose, now you put it to me, I suppose it was, and I do recall that the Commissioner at the time had announced that the trouble in Brixton was down to a European anarchist conspiracy. I was an anarchist in Brixton at that time, in the months building up to the riots, and I could say this is not. This is definitively a mark of the anger of young black men in particular, who were absolutely fed up with operations such as, I think it was called Swamp, which was a major stop and search operation against black men. So in that respect, it probably did play on my mind, I think.
What was your reaction to the finding of institutional racism when that was announced? What was your personal reaction to that? That it was a surprise, that it was inevitable? Your personal view of it in light of your senior position within the police?
I think two reactions to that. One is that many of us felt upset and offended that the whole organisation was being condemned as racist. So we'd go home to our neighbourhoods and you're the racist in the road. That kind of overreaction, probably. Secondly, in fact, there are three things. Secondly, that special branch officers had been recruited very early in their service, within 2 years, quite frequently. So they were more representative of the public at large, in my view, than the Met Police, which was also a prevailing factor. And thirdly, coming on from that, on my watch, and I think of those before me, there was absolutely zero tolerance of racism. All department and squad heads knew that. There was no room for racism in Special Branch, and we were pretty clear-sighted about it.
In terms of banter, racist language, particularly during your time as commander, what experience did you have of witnessing that?
It just didn't arise, and I think I should say that around this time of the reinvestigation of Stephen Lawrence's murder, there was an absolute laser focus within Special Branch and within my branch in SO11, which I was Director of Intelligence, that we should capture these killers and charge them and imprison them. And I recall, as Director of Intelligence, I authorised a sting operation against the 4 Lawrence suspects. So this is to emphasise, I hope, that every detective with any connection to this dreadful murder was absolutely focused on getting justice for the Lawrence family. And it's impossible to understand how anyone could even imagine that you could dig dirt on a grieving elderly couple who the investigation of which, in respect of their son's murder, has been handled badly.
Can I explore with you, in terms of racism, not explicit racist words, racial slurs, but treating those, for example, in the black community,
Yes.
treating them in a way where they are treated more harshly than other groups. I'll just give an example. If we bring up MPS 0722486, okay? Could we turn to page 116, please? So this is from HN58 to Colin Black. I understand you requested from DI HN53 a summary of the state of play of left-wing involvement in the Stephen Lawrence inquiry. The attached note has been completed from a secret and reliable source. And if we just go back to the document, we can see Commander Special Branch. Is that, we can see further down the page, is this something that you would have seen at the time?
Yes.
If we turn, please, to page 117, so it's quite a detailed note about left-wing activities relating to the Lawrence inquiry. I'm not going to read every word of this. Matters relating to the Lawrence inquiry have died down amongst left-wing groups with the approach of Christmas. Interest will be renewed in the new year at a time that will coincide with the inquiry's findings. To summarise matters as they stand at present, a great opportunity is seen to have been lost due to the infighting within these disparate groups. had the Lawrences called for a civil rights march, then it is not unrealistic to imagine that 100,000 people may have taken to the streets. Now, if we just zoom back out of that, the document and the analysis refers to, well, we've seen the Lawrences, but also refers to Suresh Grover, Movement for Justice, Joy Gardner campaign, Ricky Reel campaign, the Menson's campaign, the National Civil Rights Movement. So these are campaigns and movements in the black community. So you can see that there was a request for a summary of the state of play of left-wing involvement in the Stephen Lawrence inquiry, and you get references to black justice groups. And can you see the perspective of someone saying, well, you say that this is not racist, but this is not a report about white groups and white people. The focus is there's yet more special branch documentation about black justice groups. And so because anyone that's reported on, clearly that is an invasion of their rights, that is racist, because the result is discriminatory. What would you say to the criticism that the result is discriminatory?
Well, I should say initially I wasn't in Special Branch at this time. I was Director of Intelligence. So I wouldn't have been involved in any of this work. But as a general point, reading this now, I'd say that the objective, the purpose, was to minimise, reduce the probability of disorder on the street, or the possibility of criminality. And I think I'd also say that many of those engaged in this work would support the core groups for justice. Police officers would have, in most cases, I believe, supported many of these actions. Their objective was to keep public tranquility, really, reduce the possibility of disorder. That was their aim, not to undermine or contaminate the cause itself.
The Lawrences, the Joy Gardner campaign, the Ricky Reel campaign, the Menson's campaign, none of these groups wanted to promote anything other than campaigning for their cause.
Yes.
And yet, repeatedly, their names, the details about what they were doing appears in special branch documentation.
Yes, it's intrusive collateral reporting, which is, I regret to say, one of the great drawbacks and great risks of covering organisations such as Movement for Justice.
What would you say to this, that the description of collateral reporting makes no real difference? Because if you are reported on again and again in intelligence reports, that there comes a point when it's not incidental. For example, the Lawrences are mentioned in a number of intelligence reports, and we can see in terms of this document here references to, for example, Suresh Grover. And so can you understand the perspective that it reaches a point where describing it as incidental reporting, that in effect there's little difference in practice because people's details, information about them appears in formal special branch documentation?
I think, yes. I think seeing this document now and reading it now, I do completely accept your point. But I just repeat that the objective wasn't to build up intelligence upon those closely associated with black victims. The objective was the classic special branch objective of reducing unrest on the street.
I just want to ask you a few more questions in relation to justice campaigns and of this topic, and then we'll break for Rule 10 questions. Could we please turn to MPS 0722643? This relates to HN 81. It's in fact the cancellation of his authorisation.
Yes.
There's something that I want to ask you about in relation to it. So if we go to page 4 of this document, so we can see at the bottom, so you're the authorising officer there, but it's still contains a description of the basis for his authorisation, HN81. If we just go back a page to page 3, please. Can you just help with this? Can you see where it says objectives of use and conduct of CHIS? And it says this: to obtain information relating to threats to public order and racially motivated crime from extreme left-wing activists in the Borough of Lambeth and elsewhere in the MPS in support of local and MPS policing objectives. What is that a reference to? Racially motivated crime from extreme left-wing activists? And we're just thinking of left-wing groups. There's a number of left-wing groups, but one example, Youth Against Racism in Europe. Would you agree that the left-wing groups not usually motivated to commit racist crime? I just wonder if you can just help with what is set out there and just what that means, please.
Yes, having read this again now, I'm not sure that is a correct determination of what was the objective here. I understand the threats to public order, and I think the public order threat would come from
Mr. Pearce, I was asking you about attitudes towards UCOs being arrested, and I was explaining to you, paraphrasing the shock that it had been allowed for HN18's Rob Hastings to reach the charge phase, and contrasting that with the attitude in earlier times in the SDS. And you were explaining that you yourself were arrested when you were a UCO. What was the attitude to officers being arrested? Because, of course, as soon as they appear in court, they're lying straight away by lying about very basics of who they are. What was your attitude, though? Was it, well done, that's helped your legend, less worried about deceiving the courts, or could you help us with that, please?
Yes, the concern was how to facilitate this process without having to deceive the court. So, as I mentioned earlier, arrest, charge, any activity within the police station is acceptable. But as soon as it moves beyond that to an appearance at Magistrates' Court, you reach a stage where the court has to be notified, or the charge withdrawn, or the officer withdrawn.
Can I refer you to an example where that didn't happen? So if we just turn up Mr. Pearce's witness statement at page 223, please. It's paragraph 266. It's in relation to Jim Boiling.
Yes.
We'll go through this paragraph and then I'll just ask you about it. It's the bottom of page 223 into page 224. And so here, I have considered, and then there's a file note there, a bundle of documents including handwritten minutes regarding the arrest of Jim Boiling in his undercover identity during a Reclaim the Streets action on the 7th of August 96. DC Jim Boiling was a member of a group who entered the office of a chairman of the London Transport Executive. He was taken to Charing Cross Police Station, from where he was bailed and was subsequently charged with Public Order Act offences. A not guilty plea was entered and the matter went for trial at Horsefree Road Magistrates' Court between the 8th and 10th January 97. In the event, he was spared from running a defence case as he was acquitted after the close of the prosecution case. At the time of DC Jim Boiling's arrest, I was not working in SDS. At the time, I was assigned to B Squad, Irish Squad. I believe I became aware at some stage following my appointment as Commander Ops in October 96 regarding DC Jim Boiling's arrest. I have reviewed MPS 0526753, specifically Minute 8 on page 4, which is an update from DCI Docker. I've signed this minute on the 28th of January 97 in order to acknowledge receipt. I note this is following the conclusion of the criminal case. So if we go to that document, MPS 0526753, page 4, the minute 8, please. And so, as you set out in that paragraph, we have Docker's notes, a most satisfactory conclusion to this drawn-out affair, and once again highlights the professionalism and dedication of our SDS officers. I will speak to DC Boiling personally on my next visit to the unit, and we can see this is addressed to you, and your signature's been covered by your initials. So what we have here is standard SDS fare, in the sense of, here is a UCO that has gone through the criminal justice system. There would have been nothing to stop him providing evidence, apart from the fact that there was a successful half-time submission. But again, it's the attitude is pat on the back. I'm going to speak to this officer personally and congratulate him, and contrasting that with the position in 2007, where Rob Hastings is arrested for going into, or trying to go into, the Excel Centre, and the SDS closes shortly afterwards. So how do you account for the difference in attitude? And going back to what I was asking you, is it the case that you are correctly described as the old guard, that they were doing things outside the rules, and as soon as the new brooms come in and they realise what has been going on, that the SDS managers and UCOs breaking the law, breaking the rules consistently, Who is correct? Are the new guard who look at shock at someone being arrested, a UCO being arrested, are they naive? Are they wrong? What's your attitude towards them?
Well, I wouldn't want to comment on what I think their view might be, but my own view would be that during my time, and I think during my time as a UCO and as commander, the arrest of an SDS UCO, if not caused by negligence or committing crime or being agent provocateur, is by definition really an example of the success in that officer's infiltration. To prevent crime or disorder, he or she may be required to participate in crime and disorder, and that in itself can lead to the arrest of the officer and others. So it is time to say this is commendable work by the officer because it proves that he's trusted, he's performing well, and of course it enhances his cover. But that doesn't mean that SDS management are entitled, or any police officer, is entitled to mislead the court when it moves beyond the charging stage.
But it's misleading a court when acting as a defendant in a trial in his undercover identity. It's misleading, isn't it?
Well, that shouldn't have happened. No SDS officer should be allowed to go before a court in his undercover identity and remain in that identity for the duration of the trial.
But just to be clear, when you said it's an example of a success, it's a positive. Would your attitude not be the same as Eric Docker here, that you would agree with Eric Docker's sentiments that this is an officer who should be congratulated, and to do so personally?
Yes. Well, I suppose it depends upon the reasons for the arrest and the circumstances leading up to the arrest. If it's a very complicated case in which two sides of extremists are fighting each other, and our officer is arrested in the course of that, that can't be seen as being his fault. It's a sign of his success, actually, in gaining credit, in having credibility with the group which is infiltrating.
This is, in the greater scheme of things, low-level public order, and it's similar to HN18 when he's arrested.
Yes.
But in terms of the attitude of your almost warmth or pride
Yes.
that an officer has gone through this and wanting to speak to them personally,
Yes.
and be able to associate with that feeling of wanting to personally
Yes.
thank the officer, contrasts with those that came after you.
It does,
Who were
yes.
shocked. And how do you account for that difference, that you would describe something as a success and something that should warrant personal congratulations, compared to those that come after you that effectively use it as one of the reasons why the SDS shut down, that this sort of thing is allowed to happen?
Yes, I think because we would applaud the dedication of an officer who's gone to such lengths to infiltrate the extremist group, that he's become involved in often violent activity committed by that group. And we saw this in Reclaim the Streets and No Platform and organisations like that. Officers underwent huge hardship and were often injured, physically injured, through taking part in that kind of activity. And that, to me, would be something, provided there was no case of agent provocateur, that would be something to be applauded, because it's another step they've taken in this arduous life, leading an undercover existence at our request.
Well, for example, this same officer, Jim Boyling, told us that he came up with the idea in the J18 protests in the City of London. It was his idea, amongst other things, to purchase 4 cars, which he did,
Yes.
to organise for a number of other activists. They crashed the cars, preventing the police entering the City of London. And in terms of the way in which he described it, on the face of it, of that description, clearly agent provocateur, he's come up with an idea to carry that out. But again, in terms of what your description is really someone acting in that way, earning your respect because they're this phrase, they're a deep swimmer. So the deeper they go, the more that they get involved in that. From your perspective, that is something that would gain your respect.
I think that encapsulates the situation perfectly. Agent provocateur is never acceptable. The successful UCO will manage to walk the tightrope between maintaining cover, becoming involved in minor crime, but not provoking that crime. I think, to be fair, Jim Boyling did, from what I can remember from his evidence, despite his conduct, he was a highly successful undercover officer who was commended, and his success wasn't gauged by the times he had been arrested or the incidents of agent provocateur. It was his success in sometimes preventing violent activity taking place.
Not forgetting the relationships, 3 relationships that
Yes.
he had, and the misery and the destruction to those women's lives.
Yes, and whenever one speaks of this, one has to have great consideration and sensitivity to the women that, in his case, that he deceived, which was completely unacceptable. All I'm trying to say with great care is that despite all this, and from a coldly calculating point of view, which is mine, looking at this as the commander of Special Branch, clearly he was successful as an undercover officer. He shouldn't have used sexual relationships by deception to enhance his cover. It shouldn't have been a tactic. It shouldn't have been done. But what I'm trying to say with sensitivity is that in his case, Mark Jenner, Carlo Siraci and others, despite everything, they were often commended for what they'd done. Despite everything, I would not wish the bad things they did to totally eradicate the good, if that makes sense.
Mr. Pearce, what I would like to do now is ask you a series of questions in relation to a number of topics. Forgive the speed in which I cover these topics, but I wonder if we can turn up, please, MPS 0722623, pages 57 to 58. In relation to James Thompson, part of the plan was for him to be closely supervised following his departure from the SDS. This is an Operation Hearn document, and if we look at the bottom of the first of those pages on screen, it says Police Sergeant Thompson is shown as Aztec team leader. It appears that he was pivotal to developing the Aztec team covert deployments within the SO1 command, with Detective Inspector Trevor Morris, himself a former undercover SDS officer, commenting in March 2004, when he first arrived on A Squad, I gave DS Thompson the intelligence officer role. He made positive strides in this area. However, DS Thompson's light truly began to shine when I was tasked with creating, implementing and deploying the Aztec unit. As the day-to-day tactical organiser of the unit, DS Thompson in the startup phase of the Aztecs was exceptional. And so the question is, well, what wasn't the plan for him to be kept under a short leash and monitored? Instead, he's given, at a later date, the intelligence officer role. In short, what would you say to the point, instead of any sort of sanction, he was allowed to continue with firearms and to experience a successful post-SDS career? How was that allowed to happen, given what he did?
Yes, well, my response to that is that by March 2004, obviously, I'd gone. The anticipation in 2002, 2003, jointly with Colin Black, but strongly supported by me, was that he should be deployed in A Squad intelligence section and retained there. So this is the first time I've seen this, actually.
Could we take that document down? In relation to your evidence, and it's paraphrased, on the inability to discipline UCOs, including those engaging in dishonest and deceitful sexual relationships due to the risk of SDS exposure, did you tell Commissioner Condon that there was an issue with impunity within the SDS and an inability to apply the discipline regulations, particularly given Condon's public initiative to tackle corruption in the MPS, and this was called the Dishonesty Prevention Strategy in 1998. In other words, Commissioner Condon is promulgating a dishonesty prevention strategy, or did you tell him that you can't properly discipline an SDS UCO because you risk exposing the unit? Did you have any conversation with him of that vein?
What, with Commissioner Paul Condon?
Yes.
No.
In his statement, he stated that I am asked whether I considered the conduct of engaging in a sexual relationship and an undercover identity amounted to discreditable conduct within the discipline code, whether the process was followed in relation to any person where an allegation had been received. I was not aware of this conduct occurring, so I could not have considered whether it amounted to discreditable conduct, nor was I aware of any disciplinary actions being taken against undercover officers when such conduct occurred. However, I would like to make clear now my view that this was most certainly was discreditable conduct and should have been dealt with accordingly. So Commissioner Condon stating that he wishes to make it clear that it most certainly was discreditable conduct. Do you agree with him?
It was discreditable conduct, yes, I would agree with that.
All right. If we, do you recall earlier in your evidence when I took you to the Tradecraft Manual in
Yes.
paragraph 5.6.1, there was reference to, in the past, emotional ties to the opposition have happened and caused all sorts of difficulties, including divorce, deception,
Yes.
and disciplinary charges. In that vein, do you recall that related to what people must still have been talking about, the Chitty affair, Mike Chitty, and his relationship with Lizzie?
I think it's highly probable, but I'm not. Again, my knowledge of the Chitty matter is sketchy, but it's quite likely that it does refer to that, I think.
You referred to rules about LPP being standard rules that every police officer should cherish.
Yes.
Could you answer this? When and how did special branch officers get training on LPP? For example, when did you receive any training on legal professional privilege?
Well, to the best of my recollection, this would have been part of regular police detective training, if not part of special branch training. But there would certainly be an expectation that every police officer was aware of the principles around LPP, agent provocateur, and within SDS, the prohibition of sexual relationships.
In a different topic, in Bob Lambert's evidence to this inquiry on the 16th of June, when he confirmed that a meeting took place between himself, Peter Francis, Keith Edmondson, HN86 and you at a safe flat, he explained that was one meeting that he had he described it as an actual visual recollection of. And when he was asked what reassurance the senior managers present gave Peter Francis, Bob Lambert said, quote, "From those two senior managers, you know there is, quote, you should not be concerned, you will not be exposed." Do you remember that meeting that Bob Lambert recalls, where you were present, and that was conveyed to Peter Francis, you should not be concerned, you will not be exposed, and discussions of that nature?
No, because I was not at that meeting.
In relation to an SDS file note on true spies, and perhaps we needn't bring it up on screen, but the reference is MPS 001 and then 4 zeros. The note also refers to a meeting of journalists and how they related how they had secured interviews from provincial undercover officers and their handlers.
Yes.
And you said in your statement, paragraph 270.2, I believe this is consistent with my belief that there were a number of contributors. So not just former SDS officers, but also those from provincial undercover
Yes.
officers.
There were. And I think the chairman of ACPO-TAM had circulated heads of special branch around the country describing the programme and inviting them to assist in it.
So those are my questions. I know, sir, that you mentioned earlier today, you asked whether I had finished my questions about justice campaigns, and it was perhaps a topic you may want to return to.
Yes, I do.
There we
For many, many decades, even before the introduction of legislation, the means of keeping control of street events in London, organised by groups willing to cooperate with the police, has been for the groups and the police to cooperate to ensure that the event remains peaceful. You nod. I
Yes.
hope for the benefit of the transcript it'll have
It's true,
to be.
sir.
Yes.
It's true, sir.
One of the problems with black police justice campaigns is that, on the whole, they were complaining about actions or inactions of the police. From the most celebrated case, the Lawrence case, failing to investigate and deal with things properly, to other instances where the police had themselves caused the harm by their own actions. And you're no doubt aware, as I am,
Yes,
of the notorious cases. Did that create a difficulty for the police in that the police justice campaigns were unlikely to get in touch with the police to help with the maintenance of public order when they staged public events?
I think that's quite possibly true, and I think that a major contribution to addressing this was the Racial Violence Task Force set up by John Grieve, from whom I believe you'll be hearing.
That is, however, at the end of 1998.
Yes,
It's set up in October 1998, I think.
yes, I think it probably was, yes.
Is it the case that infiltrating and reporting on the police justice campaigns was the preferred method of finding out what, if any, public order problems there might be with their public events?
I think it was, sir, yes. And a very intrusive method to use within them.
Yeah. Was that a decision made, or is it something that simply happened?
I believe it's something that happened arising from our duty in a more widespread sense to prevent or minimise public disorder. And some of the groups which coalesced around the campaigns were, by our assessment, intent on creating street disorder. And therefore, logically, it was our duty to monitor them and, through SDS, infiltrate them.
But as I've seen, that involved the infiltration sometimes and frequently reporting on the perfectly lawful campaigns themselves.
It did, sir. It did involve, through intrusive reporting, individual SDS officers who were quite properly doing their job as they had been tasked to do. Through the nature of their work, collecting the names of people who were involved in the perfectly legitimate campaigns. But our hope was always this would be in the raw reporting and distilled out for the report to be disseminated to, for example, C Squad.
But as we've seen in relation to the Lawrence campaign, that doesn't appear to have happened. Indeed, there is almost boasting about reporting on the Lawrence campaign in SDS documents.
From time to time, sir, but I still believe that their true instinct was to have a successful infiltration of organisations which sought to manipulate the campaign or encourage those within the campaign to take a more active role, for example, in the streets through demonstrations and so on. And that in the course of that, we keep using the word hoover up, but they were collecting information which was collateral intrusion, and on the face of it, shouldn't have been reported. But it was, and the understanding was from the individual UCOs that it was for the office to take the raw report and detach from it factors which may not appear relevant.
Does any question arising out of what I've just asked now arise? No. Any re-examination? No. Thank you for your patience. I'm afraid you've had a long day, but we will resume tomorrow at the normal hour of 10 o'clock. I'm so sorry, someone stand up behind.
Sorry, we do have a Rule 10 application. We were told that this is the right of today.
Yes, I would normally expect to see that in writing, but
Trying to follow the process that we've been told.
no, very well. Well, for the future, this must be done in writing, unless for some reason that's not possible. But on this occasion and exceptionally, I will hear what you have to say. No, I'm sorry, this is a Rule 10 question that you want.
Oh, do you want me to?
I want to know what the question is so that I can then, because I don't know whether you've asked and you've been turned down or whether you are asking for the first time.
These are private Rule 10s, arising out of private.
Ah, well, in that event, we will have to resume in a private hearing, will we not?
Yes.
Forgive me, I'm being slow on the uptake, I understand. Very well, I will rise while the court is prepared for a short private hearing, and I'm afraid you haven't finished yet.